Okay, so this is what we talked about. Then it moves into suicide risk. We'll just touch on that. It's pretty important to go over. So, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Um, Higher non-fatal suicidal rates among high school students compared to adults 18 plus. I'll tell you before COVID happened, you would get a little bit of people coming in, at least to our counseling center that, had said suicide and talked about it and all that stuff too. Then COVID happened, and man, it just ramped from there. And then the funny thing, so I'm watching it, and as soon as they opened the world back up again, suicide rates kind of went down. Well, not rates, at least from people where I work talking about it. And then it went back up again. So I think, they opened up the world and people were able to get back into community and things like that too. And then um, I'm seeing more and more with youth and probably some of the same reasons as before, bullying and social media and all kinds of stuff happening too. So it's still prevalent and something to really watch out for. And so when we're working, and here's the other thing, it's so important that when you are getting your license and you're renewing your license, you have to have so many hours of continuing education in suicide risk and assessment and in handling it. So that's how kind of prevalent it is. So it says here, middle-aged adults, 45 to 54 years old, accounted for the majority of suicides. Why do you think that is? And this is in 2011. But why do you think that is? The majority of them were 45 to 54 years old.
Midlife crisis.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Why else? I think, if you look at it used to be in the older section of life. I really like to see the statistics now of age groups. If anybody wants to look that up, that'd be cool. But what the age groups are. But I think you're right, Cindy, it's um middle age and things like that. Maddie. Oh, were you gonna say something, Maddie? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to show you. I pulled it up
Oh,
actually
okay.
before you said that.
Okay, hang on one second.
Can you see that?
Hang on one second. How do I let me make sure that you can. Yeah, let me stop sharing on mine for a second. Oh, there you go. Okay, in 2022, rates were highest for adult ages 85 plus, and that's normal. 23 per 100,000. The next highest to those was 75 to 84,
Mm-hmm.
compared with rates of 2021. The suicide rates increased for those aged 35 and older and decreased for those aged 34 and below. That's interesting to know.
Mm-hmm.
So youth below age 25 had had consistently lower suicide rates than middle-aged and older adults.
Mm.
So in 2022, adolescents, what was that?
Sorry, 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 sorry. No,
Oh,
you're good. Sorry.
uh, so in 2022, adolescents and young adults aged 15 to 24 rates declined. That's awesome. From 15 per 100,000 to 13. That's good. Thanks for bringing
There
that
was,
up.
I was looking at this the other day too, and it showed that the suicide rate has actually gone down to 11th instead of 10th. And
Ooh.
I know when I was doing research a while ago, it was the eighth leading cause of death in America. So it's gone down
So
quite
what did they
significantly.
attribute to that to?
I haven't done any like research about what they attributed it to going down. Because I just looked this up again yesterday and I was like, that's kind of crazy. Um, but I thought this was interesting too. Men die by suicide more than women, and then white males accounted for 68.46% of suicide deaths in 2022.
Wow.
So it's interesting. So anyway,
Yeah,
I
and
pulled up.
firearms accounted for over half. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's usually men use firearms more than women would. And so that would even account for the lethality of it because generally if somebody takes pills or something, there's a chance of saving them or whatever. Uh,
right.
but firearms, of course, is a little. Can you bring that up again?
Oh yeah,
I just
sorry.
wanted to. No, that's okay. I just wanted to see that one thing. It said 94% of something.
It said 94% of adults surveyed in the United States think that suicide could be prevented.
Yeah. Did it, if you click on it, did it have any information in the link? Yeah, there you go. Let's see here. Um,
Like it's got like a multiple page
oh, okay, I gotcha.
thing here.
Okay, yeah, so it's saying the importance of mental health. So that would probably account for the drop is the stigma is more going away. 93% of adults would do something if they were worried about someone's mental health. And that's another thing is community and people being aware. And I know when I worked at another company, they had this thing called mental health first aid, and that was something for all their employees to go through and what to look for if somebody's, you know, thinking of suicide or so.
Hmm.
Yeah, right there.
89% of adults believe they that a trusted person can play a role in suicide prevention.
There you go.
Interesting. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
82%. Okay, go ahead.
no, you're fine.
Yeah, 82% would tell someone if they were having thoughts of suicide. That's even better. So significantly higher. So it is all about the awareness. So you can see where awareness of all this is so much better.
Yeah, interesting.
That's very interesting.
It just shows our part in it too, as clinicians too, to make sure that that's something that we do assess for, I would say, because based on this, it looks like, and obviously I don't have all the data from 2024 yet, but it looks like they are pretty, people who are having suicidality are pretty inclined to tell a mental health provider. And I'm assuming it's when prompted, but
Yeah, that's awesome. So spouse or significant other for, of course, that would be, and that's where I would tell people to go to as well. And then mental health providers, number two. That's awesome.
yeah. So anyway, do you want me to keep scrolling or are you that?
Yeah, that's good. More people believe we can do more to reduce. Okay, so 53%. Um, 92% believe there's a role for employers to see. I'm telling you, that's where it's going to start going is employers are going to start getting into this um, and that's going to help a lot. 90% believe that the media and entertainment industry should have a role in supporting. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Offer mental health. Respondents believe that employers should offer mental health benefits. Educate employees, absolutely. Educate employees about mental health and suicide.
Encourage
Yes,
them to use. Yep.
those. That's good.
Yep. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
sure.
good. Yeah. Okay. Um, get back to this. Oops.
Sorry for the little interruption. I just thought that was super interesting.
No, that's exactly what we needed. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see, share. Okay. Okay, so 10th leading, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Okay. Suicide risk assessment. Okay. Ask directly about suicidality. Make suicide risk assessment an integral part of treatment. So that's one thing when people come in, even on the intake, the phone intake, that's one of the first things we ask them is there any thoughts of harming yourself or someone else? And so that's one of the first questions we want to ask them. So make suicide risk assessment an integral part of treatment. And here's the other part I say. I know it says mental health is number two, and that's they should be the ones finding out, but you as counselors, um, you shouldn't be the person they call. Okay. Now, if they're in the session with you, great. That's awesome. And you'll have all the tools at your disposal to help them. But if it's outside of those walls of the session room, you don't want them to depend upon you, because what if you're in a session or you're not available or whatever? You don't want them calling you. First one is 911, right? 911, 988, texting, whatever it is. And then number two, have some form of community that support that they can have. So you saw spouse or significant other were the first people that they would contact. So that's what I would have in place for somebody. Now, if somebody is talks about suicide and all that, we do a safety plan or a contract for life or whatever it is, depending. And that's one of the things is who am I going to call in this case? And they even have it sign it because it's a contract. Who are they going to call and what's their phone numbers? You want to get all of that stuff um, situated so that you know that they have a plan in place to combat it. Okay. Establish a good rapport with the client so that there isn't anything surprising, if they are suicidal, that they can come to you and talk about it. Um, so the goal of suicide risk assessment is to identify the level of risk. No risk is too high or imminent. No risk too high or imminent risk. Um, so even if they say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 2. Okay. We want to take it seriously every time that somebody does talk about that. But the first thing that I ask is there a plan in place? And do you have a means? Right. So if I do have those two things, we want to take immediate action. Right. If no, I don't have a plan, I don't have means and all that stuff too, then we can kind of do a secondary one of contract for life or um, things like that too. But we want to make sure that they have something in place that's going to help them through this period. Okay. Um, okay, let's see here. Okay, so significant factors, self-reported risk that they've told you that there is a problem. They have a plan, availability of means, then they're being specific about it. So I'll tell you one time, bless this girl's heart, okay? It's her very first night, and it's on a Friday night, and her very first client that she gets that time. And I'm there on a Friday night at Abundant Life, and she comes and knocks on my door. I'm with a client, right? She comes, knocks on my door. She goes, "I've got an issue," and she pulls me out, kind of tells me what the issue is. I go in and talk to this person. He's both homicidal and suicidal, both. Okay, which is very rare at Abundant Life. Okay, very rare. But so I go in there and it's this girl's very first session ever. Okay. So I go in there and I start talking to him. And generally, when I've talked to people, there's a lot of anxiety. They may talk about, suicide or all that stuff too. I ask about a plan and means. So anyway, with this guy, he was as calm as could be. And I talked to him about his plan and his means, and he had both. Okay. And so I just established this rapport with him and was talking through him, and I wasn't going to let him leave through that. And we have security in our building, and I alerted them, of this situation. And so I asked him some questions. One question I asked him is, well, if this happens, what's going to happen to your family and all that stuff too. And he talked about, well, I just have a son and he'll be sad. I'm like, so we talked about his son some, but I wanted to see if there was any emotion in this, and there was no emotion at all. So he had made his decision. Okay. So I said, I'm going to step out. I said, is it okay if we talk to an interventionist? I said interventionist, not 911 or anything like that. I said, is it okay to talk to somebody who does this for a living, is an interventionist? And he goes, absolutely. So I step out, I call 911, and the police are there within no time. They come in and they take over and they talk to him and they take him out. So, and I don't know what happened to him afterwards. Um, there was no follow-up from that end or anything like that. But um, but they had it all under control and they said, well, we're taking him to research medical and all that stuff too. And those are people that can take good care of him. So anyway, so you have resources and you're not alone in all of this too, okay? Is there suicide history? Is there a history of attempts, things like that? What are the psychological symptoms of this? Is there depression? Here's one thing is, you even can look on medication, and the medication suicidality and thoughts may ramp up during the first part of this, and it needs to be taken into consideration. So this medication may cause that, right? So understanding the medication, all that stuff too. Environmental stress. And that was what was going on with this guy. He was going through divorce. He was, all of this stuff was going on. He had lost his job. There was so much that was going on. And I'm like, this is all temporary stuff. We can work through all of this. This is not the end, all right? So he had environmental stress, available resources. Then we want to talk to him about all of that stuff too. The beauty of it was the police came, talked to him for a good half hour or more, took him out, took him to Research Medical, where obviously they have all the resources possible that you can imagine. So he was in the best hands, no better hands than where he was taken to. Additional demographic factors. So we do want to look at that: gender, race, ethnicity, and so on. Are they at their age? Are they at an age where it's more significant, right? So want to take all of that into consideration. Okay. Suicide risk assessment. There's a SAD persons scale that you can give to them. Suicide assessment checklist that you can go through with them. Suicide assessment 5-step evaluation and triage. So there's all these things that you can go through that assess, of course, where they're at in these steps. Decision tree assessment strategy, and then, of course, safety planning. We want to plan out any risk. And here's the other part: when you get done as a counselor, document all of this stuff too, so that it's all on record, okay, to protect you, protect them, all of that. Okay. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM. So when I started, there was the DSM-4, and it was totally different. And DSM-5 there were some things that changed in it, and there were some things that didn't change, but it was all updated. I think it was 20 years in the making, and so it was all updated. Categorical assessment: if a symptom is present, counting the number of symptoms to determine the disorder. So that's kind of what we talked about earlier. Just think about generalized anxiety, or if there's 9 total symptoms in it, it'll say to be able to be diagnosed, they have to have this amount of symptoms or a time or whatever it is. So making sure that we understand what that looks like. Dimensional assessment, the severity of the symptom in the context of the overall disorder. And it does. That's what the DSM-5 is put in to place is the severity of the diagnosis, all the way, from not severe or whatever, moderate to very severe. Mm. So here's the DSM-5 structure. So here are all the categories in the DSM-5. So neuro, and really how they've got it set up too is not only by the disorder and everything too, but it kind of starts. I don't know if these are they in order? I don't think that they're in total order, but it kind of goes through the development of the person too. Neurodevelopment disorders. So that's going through the youth and things like that too. Schizophrenia, spectrum, other psychotic disorders, bipolar and related disorders. So it covers everything in there. And the next one, so they have the DSM-5 and then they have the DSM-5 and it's called TR, which is an update to the DSM-5. And so there's been things that were updated that they may not have finished in the first, but updated or changed. Not a lot.
Question.
Yeah.
Um, do they notify you of like when they change it? So like if you happen to have the DSM-5, but then they come out with the TR or they come out with something different, do they let you know or how will you know when
Well,
it's
yeah,
updated?
I don't know that maybe if you're part of I don't know, part of the ACA or something, a member or something that you may get emails or something. I don't know that they really, I mean, you as a clinician, if you use it a lot and you go to a lot of training and stuff like that, you'll know, because they'll talk about it a lot. It's a big deal.
Okay.
Because I mean, I think it was like I said, 20 years in the making from DSM-4 to DSM-5. And the DSM-5 came out in 2013, and then the updated version came out, what, 3 years ago? So maybe 2020-ish, 19. So you can see that there's a lot of years that go, so it's not, but it's a big deal. When it's updated, it's a big deal. So yeah. Um, Here we go. DSM-5 limitations. The revision process is limited and often secretive. Okay. So they don't really let you know a lot of the stuff until it is released. So it's a big deal when it comes out and everybody's, I remember in 2013, I was a student at that time and or getting ready to graduate or whatever, and it was coming out and there was a big hoopla about it and everything too. It was pretty cool. But it was supposed to come out even prior to that, and they weren't quite done with it yet. But um, and it kind of helps you. So some of the limitations are mental disorder versus normal distress. So I think that's why they put the specific in it, the severity of it, so that you can determine. Then determining the presence of various symptoms in the context of poor assessment tools. That's a good one. False positives, overdiagnosing, and culture bias. Here's here's one thing. Oh, that I kind of, because a lot of this is subjective. Okay. Um, like I told you yesterday, there was one counselor that diagnosed every male that she came across with narcissism. Okay. And it's because she had a very abusive marriage. Okay. And so any male that came across that seemed along those lines, she diagnosed him with that. And I'm like going, there's not that many people in Kansas City that probably have this, let alone seeing you. You know what I mean? So I didn't say that, but this is kind of just what I'm thinking is like, not everybody that you come across is going to have that. So it's really, kind of being careful, doing your homework on it, all of those things too. But there are poor assessment tools out there. So that's where it comes in handy. Like when you're writing this paper, what has been the research behind what you have chosen? What's the research? how rigorous was it? What are the scores on it? What's the reliability? All of those things. So obviously these ones that have been around for quite a while, like the Beck and things like that, those have been tested and all of that stuff, right? And there's new ones that always come out, and new assessments. Like, think of it this way. Um, there's probably not a lot surrounded with biblical, right? Ones, except for the ones that pastors or whoever write, okay? Like the five love languages and stuff like that too. Those type assessments. Those are done by um, maybe pastors or maybe even researchers along those lines, or maybe somebody they've partnered with. Not saying any of those are poor, but um, somebody within the biblical community saw a need for this assessment that's like the dyadic adjustment scale or something, right? So the dyadic adjustment scale wasn't written specifically for Christian relationships or anything. It was for every relationship. So what about a specific one for a Christian relationship, right? And so there's assessments out there. So you just got to take them. Are they good? Are they bad? Do the research on it, right? Um, yeah. Uh, okay. Let's see here. Okay. Um, so here's some questions, to kind of just think about what are the common components of an intake interview? Let's talk about that just for a second. We're going to go into a little bit more, and I've got a video that really goes into it from some professionals, and it's going to give you kind of what one looks like. So, but what do you think? What are some common components that come to mind when you hear that in intake interview? Mine is history. I'll start it off. History of the diagnosis. Or I don't say that. Have you been diagnosed before? What's your history of mental illness? What else?
Checking for suicide.
Yes. Good job. Medication. Go ahead, Maddie.
Just gonna say family history as far as in relational dynamics.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah, medication, family dynamics, past history. Have you been to counseling before? What's the severity? Has the thing that you've been suffering with now, has it been worse in the past or has it gotten worse? Gosh, so much that's going on. A lot of it's just history, right? History of the problem. Good. Compare and describe the six major categories of the MSE. What are the benefits of screening inventories and so on? Okay, so let me get to this MSE real quick, and we probably won't go through it all. It is fairly long, but I want to hit the highlights of it. Okay, so share. So this is psychology.net. It's really got some good videos in it. One thing is, it's kind of funny is when you get into counseling and you start watching videos. I remember when I was in school 10, 12 years ago, we would watch a lot of videos and they all be British and they would be from the 1960s and all that stuff too. I'm like, aren't there any videos out there of new? It's like, when did people stop making videos and all that stuff too? But so some of these in this psychotherapy.net, the cool thing about it is they generally have the people who created the theory in their stuff. So there are a lot of older ones in it, but it's the person who created the theory and why and things like this. So it usually has some pretty good stuff. Well, let's watch this. Now, tell me if you can hear this or not. Can you hear it? Nope, can't hear it. Should be music. Okay, hang on a second. There we go. I don't know why it shut off. Here we go. You should hear it now.
Welcome to our clinical interviewing DVD. In this video, we describe and demonstrate a wide range of different clinical interviewing responses. Our goal is to help you further develop your clinical interviewing repertoire. The material in this DVD is based on our textbook, cleverly titled Clinical Interviewing.
You know, in our life as professors, we really have come to believe in that old kindergarten activity called show and tell. So in this video, we're obviously going to be telling you about clinical interviewing skills, but we also will be showing you video clips that illustrate these. And we really hope that together they'll combine to help you become excellent clinical interviewers.
And we begin with a focus on very basic interviewing and listening skills. Skills that everyone needs to do a really good clinical interview. These skills include attending behavior, non-directive listening, directive listening and action responses, as well as the skilled use of questions. Later, we move to demonstrating more complex assessment interviews, including intake, mental status, and suicide assessment interviewing.
You know, our overall goal in this DVD is to help you become aware of how to do the skills and when to do the skills. Awareness is an undergirding that's very important in conducting professional clinical interviews and in being a mental health professional.
You know, just a few years ago, Rita, although I might be underestimating that, we had a clinical supervisor who used to always say, don't fly by the seat of your pants. You need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. You need to know where you're going, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think what he also is saying is that as clinical interviewers, we need to become more intentional. And so that's another goal that we have for this video, and that is we hope that it can move you in that direction so you become a little bit more intentional in your clinical interviewing activities. In the next 4 parts of this interviewing DVD, we focus on what we call the continuum of listening responses, beginning with the less directive, almost non-directive listening approaches, and extending to the more complex and directive interviewing or even action skills.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important before we actually talk about the techniques that we take a minute to think about a couple of things that are across techniques in interviewing. One is that because there's a power differential in the relationship, and we can never not communicate, the interviewer can be seen as directive even when they're not doing anything. It's just associated with the authority.
Yeah. Rita, that reminds me, and it goes without saying, but you know me, I'm going to say it anyway, that culture and the individual characteristics of the client are very important in the clinical interviewing process. Mm-hmm. For example, if you don't consider race, sex, ethnicity, and many other background factors, it may be that you'll be tuned out and insensitive to things that you're doing that might be off-putting to the client. For example, if you're listening closely and leaning forward and nodding vigorously, making great eye contact, but your client is sort of leaning backwards and looking awkward and uncomfortable, it's your problem. It is definitely not the client's problem, and you need to make some changes in your approach. I also find that there's a little subjectivity in how I respond personally to interviews. And for example, when you said, I understand, I just really kind of don't like that at all, because I think technically you can't really understand the deep experience of another person, especially if the person's from another race or another culture.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's very subjective. And there are, I think, some bad or ineffective ways of listening that aren't just ineffective. I think they are harmful. Or I think looking at your watch, glancing around, yawning.
Or maybe interrupting. Interrupting could be one of those negative behaviors.
Yeah, I agree. I think that across cultures, people have some kind of awareness or radar that tells them when they're not being listened to and they're not being respected. Yeah.
So I guess the bottom line is listen well, listen authentically for you, but also try to calibrate or adjust the way you're listening for the specific individual who you're with in the room.
Yeah. I think, too, I want to underline something I tell my students over and over again. Listening is a gift. Listening in our culture, being listened to very, very well, is really a rare and helpful gift. Let's talk about some of these listening techniques. The least directive set of interviewing skills, non-directive listening responses.
Right.
So the first one is Alan Ivey's attending behaviors. And these include eye contact, body posture, voice tone, and verbal tracking.
And Ivey wrote about those as basic micro skills that are always present in the interviewing interaction. In addition to those, there
Okay, I'm going to move a little bit forward. So I just wanted to kind of show the importance of what they're saying is going back to your helping skills. You guys went through that class, so we won't need to watch this part of it. But just saying, they're kind of saying the importance of all of your skills that you're learning that go into it. So I'm going to move forward a little bit because it just shows, the next one just shows a video of them using basic listening skills. So let's go a little bit forward to, this is about therapeutic questions. Okay, so.
And the client is always the final authority.
Okay.
In this final section associated with the listening continuum, we explore questions in general and therapeutic questions in particular. And we focus on these because questions can be so commonly used. They can also be very effective, but then I think oftentimes interviewers can misuse questions.
Why do you feel that way, John?
Well, it's because I
mean, are you feeling kind of insecure about this section?
I think right now I am.
Yeah, well, I don't understand it. I wonder why you want this section right here anyway.
And right now I'm feeling very insecure about the whole thing. And I guess that's the point. I mean, I get the fact that questions can be very powerful and they can be intimidating. They can be used in ways that make clients respond in a defensive way. I mean, questions like, when did you stop lying to your employer? What are you really thinking about your mother?
Right.
And those kinds of things can insinuate things. They can be used to wound people, definitely used to control the interview or the conversation.
And, of course, our clients are not as skilled as your average politician at sliding away from a question. And so they're stuck. They either have to answer the question or be seen as resistant. So questions can become kind of a no-win situation for clients.
Yeah. You know, that's one of the reasons that in teaching, I like to assign the students a pretty long interview where they can't ask any questions, where they just have to use active listening skills to gather information. And I think that can be a real learning experience for clients, maybe, or for students, maybe even up to 30 minutes of non-directive listening without questions.
Yeah.
There are many different types of questions.
There are open, closed, indirect, swing, projective, and of course a group of questions that we just call therapeutic.
Now at this point we've moved a little bit away from the listening continuum in that questions vary in their level of directiveness. They're all directive because questions come from the interviewer and are used to guide or manage or control what clients say. But some questions are much more leading and others are much more gentle and less directive.
In this next clip, our colleague from the University of Montana, Chris Fiore, demonstrates the use of questions as she works with Umit, who's a graduate exchange student from Turkey. And you'll see the skilled use of questions woven together with some other non-directive and directive listening responses. And you know, John, of course, this is how a real clinical interview goes. You weave things together, you use more and less directive things, and you'll notice that even sometimes Chris will do a paraphrase, but there'll be a rise in her voice. There'll be a little inflection change that works the same way as a question.
Hi, how can I help you today?
You know, I don't know, it's kind of long winter in Missoula, and I'm not used to. It's my third year in Missoula, but I am not used to it still. But it was longest winter for me, I think.
So it's not just the weather, because you've been here 3 years, it just feels long for you?
Yeah, maybe, because I didn't see sunshine long time, and I feel weak sometimes. I cannot get up. It makes me think, what I'm doing.
Oh, so you feel bad enough that you can't get up. Can you tell me more about that?
Where I am from is more than 300 days sunshine, and people are walking around a lot, and it's kind of crowded. People don't go bed early. I feel like I just miss sometimes them.
So you're missing home a lot, and a big change from Missoula is we don't have 300 days of sunshine.
Yeah, absolutely. You have in August and September, and I'm not here in August also.
Okay, so this is a big adjustment for you. But you've been here 3 years.
Yeah.
What's it like for you during the winter? You mentioned a little bit that sometimes you don't feel like getting up.
Yeah, 6 or 7 hours sleeping was enough for me, but now it feels like I'm sleeping more than 10 hours.
Okay.
In my culture, we usually hang out a lot of times, like 3 hours just chatting, 4 hours. But here, everybody is busy or work, that's why even if I am free, how can I hang out with people?
Okay. So you and your friends have a different life here.
Yeah.
So in the best case scenario, how would you want your day to look like? What would it look like in the best case scenario?
Firstly, I want to finish my homeworks as early as possible. And in Turkey, my mom cooked for me.
Right.
That's why it's
very different.
Yeah.
It's all very different here. Do you keep in contact with your family?
Oh, yeah.
How often?
I call my mom almost every day. Yeah, because if I don't call, she really misses me. I am the best for her. And that's and I call her every day.
Okay.
And I call the other family members. I have 6 siblings, including me.
Wow.
And 3 of them got married, and my parents are. I just call the others once or twice a week. My expectations from friendship relationship is
Right.
different than their.
Right.
That's why it doesn't work sometimes.
Okay. So there's so much. That sounds like you're adjusting to a lot of different things.
Oh yeah.
Not food, light, time, how you're spending your time, and also this difference in how friends are, and even your communication.
Yes.
And that's a lot to adjust to in the time you're here. So what what would be helpful for you at this point? What do you think you could do with the time that we have talking? How could I be helpful?
I don't know. Maybe I have to learn more. I have to accept I am here in Missouri. And actually, I said always bad things about living here, but there are some good things also. That's why I'm stay here.
Okay.
I have chance to go back. But in my culture, it's so complicated. People just judge everything and just rumors, gossip. In here, nobody cares anything. That's why I love here.
Okay.
You just,
So
you
there's
just do your
good
business and go home. It's the best part of living here.
things. Okay.
And just you can walk around just by yourself. It's not crowded. There are advantages about living here also. And even if your friend, you can go if there is a party 8 p.m. you can go 9 p.m. and you can leave 9:30. Nobody say to anything. But in
Right.
Turkey, if you go 9 p.m., you say you might have trouble because you are late. If you leave early, you will have trouble. Just here is
Different expectations.
Yeah.
Different expectations.
John, I'm struck by how graceful and skilled Chris is in that tape. She's simultaneously expressing interest, even her facial expressions and her mixing of directive, indirective, and questions. It's really very nice.
Yeah, her attending skills are fabulous. She's very smooth. But I wonder if you could say which of the types of questions did she not use during her interview with Umit?
And I can say that it was the indirect question. Partly, I noticed that because I don't think that's really a question. Grammatically, it's not a question.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's not, although we use that language just because it sort of is an implied question. It kind of draws information out of clients. Another thing I wanted to comment on in Chris's interview is that she uses a question about the best scenario that is possible for Umit.
Right.
And I think that question is an example of a projective question, which is a therapeutic question, which in the solution-focused theoretical place, it would be referred to as a presuppositional question. And because it really asks Umit to project himself into a future place with a better or best scenario.
I want to say a little more about that, but first I also want to note that questions are another one of those techniques that have cultural meaning and valence. So cultures handle amounts of questions differently. The appropriateness of questions varies. People can feel very lost if they're from a culture where they expect the person in authority to ask questions and you don't,
Right.
or pummeled if they're not used to a lot of questions.
Exactly.
And as you said, there's a big theoretical link to some kinds of questions. There's the big four in the reality therapy questions. Of course, that's what do you want?
And what are you doing? Is it working? And should you make a new plan?
Very good.
And those are very direct questions that help clients focus on problem solving as well. But really, I think when it comes to therapeutic questions, those kinds of questions most squarely fall in the domain of solution-focused theory and therapy.
Right.
They're really questions, and there are many different kinds, and they can be used well and they can be overdone.
Right.
But basically what they do is they have clients focus on positive scenarios, often the future, constructive things that are already working in their lives.
Right, right. So I think there is a good example of that in a clip with TJ. So let's watch just a couple more minutes of John with TJ.
I want to go back a little bit. I have a kind of a hard question for you. You have had times, 30 times or so, that you've gotten in fights. I'll bet there have been some times when you almost got in a fight, but then you chose not to, somehow, one way or another. Has that ever happened? And if so, how did you manage to choose not to fight?
When it wasn't worth it.
Okay.
It's
Evaluate.
fighting for nothing is stupid.
Yeah. What do you think in our last 3 minutes? What do you think, as you look at the future for you, what do you think some of the most important things are that you're going to learn about yourself and about staying out of fights?
I'm going to learn about myself. I'm definitely going to think about a lot of things I have done before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the bad things that happened and what's led up to that.
Okay.
You know, see the signs of where it's going, stop it before it happens.
So John, that was great. I really like how you used the exception question and framed it as saying, this is kind of a hard question, because that hooks a kid like TJ to maybe pay attention and see if he can get it right, you know?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good example of how it's important to gear the therapeutic question to the individual client. And you know, questions, therapeutic questions, solution-focused questions can be asked in many different ways. And yet they almost always focus on moving the client toward the future and toward a more positive future.
So John, if you woke up tomorrow morning
And a miracle occurred.
and you suddenly had more spare time, what would that look like?
Well, I think my wife and I would be spending a lot of time in a video production.
Yeah, well, I guess we can see where this is going. Obviously, you can see the importance of using those solution-focused questions.
And the power of questions, I think, should not be underestimated.
So here's where they're going to get into the intake that we've kind of been talking about. And so that you can see this, but you can see the whole time what they're talking about are the different types of questions that you can use during your first intake and stuff, so that you are putting together your plan, but it is assessing the whole time. Okay, so let's get to the next one.
In this section, Rita is demonstrating an intake interview. And of course, intake interviews are shaped by the client, by the interviewer, by the setting, and by just about every factor that you can imagine. In this particular intake example, the client, Michelle, comes in and has filled out a form, but it only identified in a general way that she was struggling with anxiety in her life. And so you should watch at the very beginning of this video clip at how quickly Michelle jumps into her specific problem, describes her symptoms, and then Rita does a nice job both exploring and sticking with the chief complaint, but also staying with the format or structure of an intake interview. Keep in mind that some clients will not jump so quickly into their presenting complaint. I remember back in the day, well, maybe just a few years ago when we were younger, that we might take 3 or 4 sessions just to deeply identify a presenting complaint and develop a problem formulation.
Okay, so let's watch the beginning of this work with Michelle. So Michelle, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And I would like to start today by just checking in with you on what brought you in today for the counseling.
Okay. This feels a little bit weird. I've never gone to see a counselor before, so I'm not exactly sure how to start, but I had a couple of, I guess what they called panic attacks. I went to the hospital for one because I didn't know it was wrong, and I was kind of freaking out. So I went there, I thought there was something wrong with me, and they said that there wasn't anything physically wrong with me, but I was having some anxiety issues, so they said to come here to the clinic, and so I did.
Wow.
So I really don't know other than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had a couple of those happen?
Yeah, the first one was the one that I went, well, I had a couple littler ones before that, but the first big one was the one that I went to the hospital for, because I just felt like my chest was hurting and I couldn't breathe, and I thought maybe, I don't know, I didn't know what to think. So I went there and they ran a battery test and blood pressure and all that kind of stuff, and so then they said that I was okay, but I should probably check in with a mental health person, and that kind of made me feel weird because I've never had anything like this happen before. So.
Yeah. So it felt kind of like, uh-oh, they're telling me something's in my head. And you felt weird about it. But here you are.
Yeah.
Decided to go after it. So is it okay if I ask you a little bit about what led up to those experiences?
Sure. Well, a couple of them seemed like they came out of the blue. But I've been having some stress at school. I'm a second year at the university up here, so
yeah. So you had a couple of those classroom-based sort of.
Yeah. Well, the other one I was in like at a concert, like at a bar, and there was lots of people there, and I was kind of like right in the middle of the crowd. So it wasn't at school, but it was kind of seemed like when there was a lot of people, it made me
just that crowded feeling, and then
like I can't get out, and I need to get out, and I can't get out.
Okay. What's the first physical symptom or thought? Which comes first? And
usually it's the chest heaviness.
So right
like
here.
I can't breathe. And then just kind of it feels like I can't get out, and I need to. And then I get kind of freak myself out, I think, at that point.
What starts to go on in your
But I think that I can't get out. I'm not going to be able to get out. I need to be able to get out. What happens if I can't get out?
Yeah.
And then it just sort of feeds on itself from there.
Yeah.
And I start breathing heavy, and my chest starts hurting more, and it just kind of gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so I'm guessing at about that point you thought, okay, fine, I'll go see somebody.
I know. I kind of tried to play it off like, if the bad one doesn't happen again, then I can probably deal with the other ones. But yeah, I mean, I've never, like I said, I never talked to a counselor, so I wasn't really sure.
Wasn't your favorite idea?
Or not. But at this point, I was like, well, if it works, great.
Okay.
If not, then I guess I'm not any worse off than I was before. So.
Right. Okay. So I think what I'd like to do, if it's all right with you, is kind of go backwards for a few minutes. But I do want to note that we're pretty clear on what our goal would be in working together.
Yeah.
And that would be
no more panic.
No more
panic.
panic.
Would be delightful.
Yeah. And we may not be able to go right to no more panic, but maybe an intermediate goal would be how to handle when that heaviness comes, when those thoughts start, how to handle that, and maybe in some way we gradually get control of it as sort of steps toward the ultimate goal of no more panic attacks. Does that seem okay?
Anything's better than what's going on now, I think. So I'm pretty much game for whatever.
I do want to notice a couple things, though, and that is you've coped with some things that are pretty scary, and you had a lot of common sense, sort of got yourself out of the situation, you breathed, you walked, you gave yourself permission not to go back to class. And so I'm just noticing that you've got a lot of skills already.
Cool.
That we'll probably notice again. So John, it's a little bit startling when the client arrives and has already got a diagnosis and is ready to begin fixing the problem.
Absolutely. You can feel, I think, like you have a lot of pressure on you to jump immediately into fixing the problem. But I'm glad that instead you kept exploring the presenting complaint or the chief complaint, and then you went a little bit into other areas and really were building and gathering information that helped with establishing the beginning of a treatment plan. In particular, I liked the fact that you identified for the client, for Michelle, what was heaviness in her chest, and that seemed to be a trigger for her panic attacks.
Right. I did intentionally transition to history, but before I went there, I really had noticed some strengths in Michelle and wanted to reflect those before we went into history taking.
At the risk of complimenting you too much, I really did like the way that you focused on her strengths, and I liked the way you developed with her some intermediate goals rather than sort of feeding into the idea that the goal is to eliminate all panic attacks. In fact, it can be very discouraging for clients if that's their only goal, and you helped her see that there might be some intermediate goals along the way.
Yeah. Well, I did explicitly foreshadow that shift, and then we did do some history taking, and it was important, I think, to signal that we're going to make that shift, especially in an intake interview, because clients don't know where things are going.
And you know, gathering at least a little information about personal history is important. I think it's important from the client's perspective, and there are many different ways of doing it, but clients often have a sense of continuing from the past to the present to the future. Now let's watch as Rita's intake interview with Michelle continues.
So let's do a little bit of background, you know. You can't go see a shrink without a little background.
Do I have to lay down on the couch?
Yeah, if you would, please.
All right, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
My dad was around till I was about 4, and then they divorced, and I didn't really have a lot of contact with my dad after that. My mom was a single mom and kind of took care of me. She was a nurse, and so she was working a lot, but she had somebody to watch me during the night, so she was there during the day a lot, but sometimes she had to sleep, and but a lot of times she was there, especially after I went to school. Then she'd sleep while I was at school and be up when I was up, and then after she put me to bed, she'd go to work late night. So
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty hardworking mom.
yeah, she was very hardworking and very supportive, and
Is she still alive?
she is. Yeah,
How's your relationship these days?
it's good. She's like I said, very supportive and has always been there for me. And but
Brothers, sisters?
I have 2 older brothers. One's in the Navy, and he's on deployment, so that's kind of nerve-wracking. And then the other one is at school at a university in California, so they're both gone. And I'm kind of close with my mom and go over there and visit her all the time and stuff like that. And they still keep in touch and things like that, but they're obviously not around as much.
So, do you know if either of them have had anything like what you're coping with?
I think that not the brother that's in the Navy, because they wouldn't allow him in with anything like that. But I think the one in California mentioned that he had been diagnosed with something like generalized something like with anxiety, like he just was worried about a lot of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly. I mean, we talk sometimes, but not super often. So, but I think I remember him saying something like that, and then he's on medication for it.
Okay.
So,
I should have asked this before, but did they give you any medication at the hospital?
no.
Okay.
Nope.
Right. So, how about mom and anxiety?
I think that, I mean, she's always seemed like a real worrier, but hasn't been any sort of, she's never seen anybody for it or anything. She's one of those kind of catastrophic thinkers that's always like, what happens if this happens? And then, then you'll lose your car, then you won't have a job, and then you'll be a bum, and then, it's kind of like that all the time with her, just a constant running into the ground. I learned at an early age not to tell her things that I thought might be at all dangerous seeming, because she wouldn't let me do them.
Gets up in arms and
so I'd just do them and not tell her.
Yeah, interesting. So you protect her a little bit from things that would make her anxious. And so do you mind if I ask you about your drug and alcohol history a little?
Sure. I guess, I really used to like smoking pot a lot. I quit probably 8 months ago when the first year of pharmacy, I was able to kind of do it without really studying or being that concerned about getting buckled down. But now it's getting harder, so I really felt like I needed to stop. But I've been smoking pot pretty much since I was 11 or 12. I started with one of my older brothers, and I really liked it because it mellowed me out. I was laid back, and so
How long ago? What's the last time?
7 months ago, I would say.
So you just kind of stopped cold turkey?
Yeah, I just was like, this is not helpful for me right now, and I don't need to do this anymore. But my boyfriend kept smoking, and that, like I said, is part of
those problems.
And I mean, me being in the area that I'm going into, I really can't have somebody with pot sitting in my house smoking. If they got if you got busted, then my career is basically down the toilet. So I don't know if that's something I want to be connected to for the rest of my life. And at this point, we've been together off and on for 4 years, and it's not something, I mean, I feel like either I need to be done or we need to do something. So
it's kind of a point of stress right now, or a point of concern. Okay, so I'm wondering about other drugs or
I was muted, sorry. So you're seeing kind of how the initial intake is. So she's asking all these questions, setting everything up um, to go into to a deeper dive. So I'm going to skip through this part of it. So I just wanted you to kind of see, they're establishing this rapport, asking questions, and really during this time, she's also seeing, is this person willing to answer questions? Is she being truthful in them? And, things like that too. So it's like you guys are getting to know each other during that time. Is this person trustworthy? And she's doing the same with her and all of that stuff too. So I'm going to move into, now it's the MSE, the mental health examination, mental status is what it is. Give me 1 second. Okay, 1 second. Okay.
Change, you actually might have a little motivation to do things like homework. So we did have a homework assignment, as you saw, and then we had summary and closure, and we had a plan to get back together, including permission for her to call the clinic earlier. Because when you are dealing with panic attacks, sometimes you need that reassurance that you can make contact earlier. So in this section, we're going to watch a mental status examination with a young man named Carl. This is a general check-in. He was referred because of some odd ideation and bizarre behaviors. So his vocational instructors and educators were a little bit concerned.
A traditional mental status examination includes about 9 domains. And the first 3, appearance, behavior or psychomotor activity, and attitudes toward the interviewer or examiner, are always just inferred. In other words, you just observe the client and then you make some inferences about those 3 categories. The remaining 6 categories are usually assessed in a little bit more of a direct way. And these other 6 categories include affect and mood together, speech and thought together, perceptual disturbances, orientation and consciousness, memory and intelligence, as well as reliability, judgment, and insight.
As I look at that list, it seems to me that the client's speech is something more inferred or observed.
I think you're right. It's usually inferred or observed more indirectly also. Although in the upcoming interview, I accidentally forgot to ask one of the speech assessment items, which is to ask Carl to repeat after me, no ifs, ands, or buts.
So, well, no ifs, ands, or buts. Let's watch a little section of Carl. Carl is a 19-year-old young man who is a student at Trapper Creek Job Corps. He has a lot of adjustment struggles and eccentricities, and you'll notice that he also has some tic-like mannerisms. We've both met with Carl in earlier sessions, and we've talked about those mannerisms, so in this tape, you won't hear us inquiring about those.
As you get ready to watch this mental status examination interview with Carl, it might be a good idea to pull out a piece of paper and jot down a few notes in each of the 9 domains as you observe the interview. Well, Carl, thank you for coming in, and what I would like to do with you today is just a very standard interview that is sort of a way for me to get to know how your brain is working. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions, but first I just want to start off by sort of asking some very easy questions, and then some of the questions will get harder as we go. And so, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that sounds okay.
First one is state your full name.
I've actually had quite a few different names growing up. You want my current name?
Whatever you would like.
Carl Dunn.
Okay. You said you've had quite a few different names growing up.
Yes, actually, my mother changed her name. I don't know whether or not she legally changed them or anything, but she always changed our last name depending on what guy or girl she was dating at the time. And I was CJ once. I tried to be Todd the second time, but the name just kind of sounded ridiculous. I've got Warren Jr., Raccoon, because the rings around my eyes.
What's your favorite name for yourself?
Just Carl Dunn.
Carl Dunn. Okay.
Yeah. I don't really have a favorite name for myself. I just pick whichever one sticks better.
Okay. Well, I'll just stick with Carl if that's okay.
Okay.
And what is today's date, Carl?
3/29/212, I believe.
Okay. All right. What day of the week is it?
No, it's 3/20. And never mind, I don't remember what day it is. Okay, what?
What day of the week is it?
Okay, it's Thursday.
Thursday. Okay. And can you tell me what season of the year it is?
It seems to be spring, going from winter into spring, but judging by the weather, it's still kind of wintry. There's a lot of snow.
So we're going from spring, or from winter into spring.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Which one do you think we're in?
Here, spring, but like a Job Corps winter.
Okay. And what is the name of the town or city where you are living now?
Darby.
Darby. Okay. Okay. Now this is a hard question. Do you know who the governor of Montana is?
No.
No. Okay. So my next question is going to be a test of your memory. Is that okay if we do that?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say 3 things, and all you need to do is when I'm finished saying them, you repeat them back.
Okay.
Okay? So the 3 things are cup, newspaper, banana.
Okay. Okay.
What are the 3 things?
Cup, newspaper, banana.
Okay. All right. Good work. Now, this one is a little bit harder. You ready for something a little more of a mental challenge? I'd like you to begin with the number 100 and then count backwards by 7s. So it's like 100 minus 7.
193, 86, 79, 72, 65, 58, 51, 40.
Okay, you can stop. Good work. That seemed pretty easy for you.
It was pretty easy. I used to be able to multiply double-digit numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're pretty good with math. You're pretty good with numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to be a lot better at reading. In the 2nd grade, I knew words that none of the college teachers I used to visit knew. And I was able to read beyond the college level, even in a couple other languages. And then I forgot all of that, but that's another story.
Sure. So try this one. Spell the word world backwards.
WROW.
Okay. Now, who is currently the President of the United States?
I believe it's still Obama.
Okay. Do you know who was president before Obama?
Bush, I believe.
Okay. Do you know who was president before Bush?
No, I don't remember who it was before Bush. I mean, I know who it is, I just don't remember the name.
Okay. Can you describe the person?
Christian white guy?
Okay.
I'll know him when I see him.
Okay.
Then before that was Bush, and then...
Okay, so before the Christian white guy, there was Bush, and then...
Another Christian white guy. Okay, I've got the, I'll remember the faces. I'll if I see a face of the president, I'll be able to recognize it.
You can
but
recognize.
I don't remember. I don't really know all that much about the presidents.
Do you know who was before the first Bush?
His father.
Okay.
Before Bush was his father. Bush. Before him was the other Christian white guy.
Okay.
Why is it that all the presidents up until Obama were Christian white males?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Why do you think?
Because people are naturally judgmental, and there are a lot of racist people out there. Everything's always going to be fair. It's always going to have something to do with looks, religion, and ethnic and national backgrounds, stuff like that. Christianity and stuff like that just happens to be one of the more powerful religions. So coming from that aspect, and that lots of people are compelled by the religious beliefs to do a lot of things. That's why that it would only make sense that the government in general would look for white Christian males. You know.
Okay. Sounds good. Now I'm going to ask you some questions that are a little different, questions about feelings. Okay.
Feelings, yeah.
And my first question about that is, how are you feeling right now?
Calm.
Okay.
That's about it.
Okay. So you're feeling calm. Now, if you were to rate your mood, 0 is the worst possible mood. It's like you're so down and depressed that you're just going to kill yourself. It's over. And 10 is the happiest you could possibly feel. Okay, you're so happy, maybe, I don't know what you do when you're really happy, but maybe you're dancing and singing and you're just super happy. On that scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate your mood right now?
Right down the middle.
You're about a 5, you think? Down the middle?
Well, I had a pretty good day, but yesterday was pretty crappy, and I've got some stressful things on my mind, so it's about a 5.
So you're about a 5.
Yeah, I was right there in the middle.
Okay. Now, if you were to say the worst mood you've had for the last 3 months. You know, Rita, many professionals, I think, are a little reluctant to do something as structured and evaluative as a mental status examination for fear that it might adversely affect the rapport or the therapeutic relationship. One thing that I found, and maybe it's just because I'm a little bit weird, is that I actually find that using that kind of structure and the assessment parts of the mental status examination can be framed in a way that engages the client and I think at least doesn't adversely affect the relationship. And I think I try to frame questions as they might be difficult, and I try to respond empathically when clients have trouble or struggle with the questions.
Right. I think you do put people at ease. I like how you kind of ask permission. You tell them it's going to be a hard question. But even with all of that reassurance, you can feel the anxiety that comes up in Carl when he can't get something right, and then he says he was able to multiply double-digit numbers in 2nd grade, you know. But really, there is always that urge to ask about the past, to explore, and mental status exams are about the functioning of the client in the present.
And so even Carl's defensiveness that we saw, and maybe his exaggeration and his use of humor, that's all data that the mental status examiner or the clinical interviewer can use to make statements within those 9 different domains.
Right.
In particular, I think at the very least we know Carl is a creative young man.
Yes, we do. And one thing that has always been a little confusing for me in mental status exams is affect and mood. So the strategies for assessing those are important. Remember that affect is something that you infer, that you observe, and mood is something that you actually ask about, and you ask about the mood now with some rating form, and then you can also ask about mood the past 3 months, the highest, the lowest, do an average with that.
And you get a chance to compare where the client is now with previous highs and lows. In this next section,
Yeah, let's watch another one.
okay, in this next section, I start off by doing an assessment of Carl's intermediate memory. And one thing I think that we'll discover is he has an excellent intermediate memory. He also shows that he has a pretty darn good sense of humor.
Right.
Now I've got kind of a tricky question for you. You ready?
Does this question do backflips? That's not very tricky, is it?
All right, I guess not.
Okay.
Remember a few minutes ago I asked you to remember 3 things that I said.
Yeah.
Can you remember what those 3 things are?
Cup, banana, and newspaper.
Okay. You got them.
Well, it was cup, newspaper, banana in that order, but still.
You got all 3 anyway. You even remember the order they came in.
Of course. I'm smarter than your average Job Corps kid, which is about average.
Okay. All right, now I have some questions. Those were questions about your feelings and emotions. And now I have some questions that are more about your thinking, okay? And then we might come back to feeling a little bit too. But tell me if, let's see, do you ever get any thoughts stuck in your head that just kind of go over and over and over?
I've got millions of those. Which one do you want?
What would be a typical one that gets stuck in your head?
Well, sometimes whenever something happens, I picture another event happening as a result of it, that gets stuck in my head. Songs get stuck in my head. Voices get stuck in my head.
Yeah.
They don't really belong to anybody. They just kind of sit there, and they used to tell me to do things, but now I get into arguments with them on occasion. It's
okay. So you have some songs that get stuck in your head, and then some voices that get stuck in your head.
Well, yeah, I like to make up the voices because it helps drown out the music. I mean, the voice thing is intentional.
Okay.
It helps get the songs and the thoughts and memories out of my head.
Okay.
So that's kind of like a self-help right there.
So one of the ways you get the something that's stuck in your head out of your head is maybe you sort of create these voices in your head, and they kind
of like an invisible imaginary friend.
Okay. Okay. Do you have a consistent invisible imaginary friend?
No, not really, because they're not technically imaginary friends. They're just little bodily voices that I made up in my head. They're like little thoughts that I created. Like I find a way to create a thought that overpowers all the other noises and stuff that I hear in my head.
Yeah.
It kind of drowns those out. So these other voices that it's pretty much I'm using my imagination.
Sure. Well, do you have anything, this is just a different kind of question, do you have any beliefs that other people think are strange or odd? Unusual beliefs?
Quite a few, actually.
Well, give me an example. What would be an unusual belief?
Well, I really don't care if anybody's into bestiality.
Okay.
I mean, for starters, there are guys out there that are that are raping little kids. People are out there get violated 24/7. There are necrophiliacs. There are all this other stuff, you know. I mean, lust is like the most powerful out of the 7 sins, you know, out there, you know. And animals, for instance, for that example, they're pretty much born to me, you know. I mean, I really don't care. The only reason why it's considered a bad thing is because people just didn't understand it back then.
Okay.
Which is nothing really to understand. The only risk is that they find a new kind of STD, but, you know.
So one of your unusual beliefs might be that you
really don't care about bestiality. I don't
one
think
way
it's
or
a big
another,
deal.
doesn't matter to you much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I have some more questions for you. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever see or hear things that other people don't see or hear?
Sometimes I see ghosts, but other people see them too.
Okay. Now, do you ever think that the radio or the television is speaking directly to you?
Right. I don't think that the radio or the television is ever speaking directly to me.
That would be a no.
No.
Definitely not. Okay.
I mean, unless the TV turned on, the guy said, and I just happened to be sitting in my room by myself in my house. Let's say I have a house in my house and watch TV, and the TV magically comes on, and I'm single at the time, and the guy goes, "Are you lonely? A little, even a little lonely? Oh yeah." Are you sitting underneath the covers with, you know, I'm not going to get into that. I'm just saying I'm probably not going to believe it unless some really weird stuff goes on.
Okay, yeah. So for the most part, you're saying probably absolutely not.
I'm trying to watch my language here, so.
Yeah. Has anyone ever tried to steal your thoughts or read your mind? I know that's kind of an unusual question, but it's okay. Some people think that, and that's just mostly why I'm asking.
People try to steal the thoughts and read their mind, so that's original. Wow, how do I answer this one?
Yes or no?
I never thought that anybody was trying to steal or read my mind, but I used to have friends and family and stuff that were Wiccan. I've met quite a few people. The knowledge of the universe.
Speaking of knowledge, I've got a few more questions for you.
Yes,
And these are a little more knowledge based. So, in what way is a pencil and a computer alike?
You write with them. You could transfer knowledge from paper. You can transfer knowledge from one spot to another with it. Pretty much the only difference between a pencil and a computer is that the computer is electrical, and the pencil you can't store small bits of data on. Except for the pencil's entire system in itself, the computer requires multiple components. So yeah, there's a lot of differences in them too, but they're pretty much the same thing.
There are a lot of differences, but they can use some of the same purpose.
Yes, the same purpose. They even have the same functions.
Yeah.
The only difference is one's one-handed, the other's two-handed. There's a lot of differences.
What if, in the future sometime...
It's pretty much the approach of doing the exact same thing.
Okay. What if, in the future sometime, you found a gun hidden in the bushes near your home? What would you do?
If I found a gun in the bushes around my home, I would probably... Because I always have a friend like this that's either in the police division or it's like works with the government or something. I just get them to check the gun, see if there's any signs that it may have been used to harm somebody. If not, register the gun and keep it for myself.
So you'd get somebody to check the gun out.
Yes. And then I'd see if I could get the gun registered so I could keep it.
And see if you could keep it.
Because it's a free gun.
Yeah. And the last question, and then if you have questions for me, I'll try to answer them. But what would you do if a close friend of yours obviously had a drug or an alcohol problem?
Well, as far as the getting drunk part goes, I actually don't care if they get... I actually do care if they get drunk, so I would do what I can to take care of it. If somebody, though, did do drugs, but it didn't affect them in a negative way, per se, like, if it was like marijuana or hemp, I really wouldn't care. As long as they, you know,
but let's say they had a serious problem.
Oh, an actual problem, then I'd try to help them with it. I'd try to get them off of it, you know.
Yeah, you'd try to be helpful.
Try to fly it down the dose, just come up with strategies. But I wouldn't really try to make anybody quit, just cold turkey, you know. I wouldn't.
Try to help them cut down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I really don't care.
Okay.
You know, I mean, marijuana could have helped the world, but the lumber company got pissed when that marijuana is illegalized, but because of all of its uses.
Yeah. Well, now, questions for me. The purpose of the mental status examination is to gather data or observations on the client that you can then organize into the 9 different mental status examination domains. But as you probably noticed, my preference is to try to do that in a way that is empathic and collaborative.
Which I think is great. I really think that it's a great relationship building thing, and you actually get more information that way. But of course, that accounts for some of the wide-ranging and sometimes tangential content that you saw with Carl. But it is important information.
Although it would make the interview shorter if I stayed a little more structured. Now, if you watched the mental status examination interview with Carl and you jotted down a few notes in those 9 different areas, now would be a really good time for you to look back at those notes and the 9 areas and to try to make a few statements about that are a little more conclusive about what you saw in Carl during that interview. And even better, it would be a really good idea to compare those notes and those conclusions with your classmates so that you can get a little bit more objective in how you are evaluating the mental status examination data.
Okay, what was your thoughts? So did it make it a little bit more sense watching it happen as, you know, you had somebody real in there that that they were kind of interviewing, make more sense of how how
Yes. I like Carl.
Yeah. So what did you like about that?
I liked seeing the interaction with somebody that's real, and like the way I like how they explained beforehand that they had already addressed the little ticks and stuff.
Yeah.
And I noticed how he just kind of just went right past it like it hadn't happened, and that had to be difficult.
Yeah. So what else did you guys see about this? What stood out to you? Doesn't have to be with just with Carl, but the whole thing. When they talked about the 9 domains that they were going to go through, did that make sense? You know, that say, I'm going to check all of these things about them. So this is the first assessment that I have with them. So this will be the answering all these questions is now something where I can go in the direction. So I can pick a direction after this.
I think I probably would have done something similar to Carl, in that position of like wanting to elaborate or ask other questions. Like whenever I was listening to it, all those questions made sense to me, except the one about if I ever would think like someone was trying to steal my thoughts or read my mind, I would like want to understand that question further, because how I perceive a question may be different than what the counselor is intending for that to be. But also, that's really where the test is about is, okay, how is it that my brain is working in relation to it? So, yeah, I think I probably would have just elaborated a little bit more than just answering the question yes or no or things like that, because yeah, it can be easy to kind of want to make sure that the counselors know my brain fully. And yeah, just elaborate.
That's a great observation there too. So it's like, he asked this question. It's kind of a little bit off the wall, a little bit, right? So, but then he's like going, he just answered it just like that. So to me, that's almost that's a normalcy for him. It's a normal thing. So this wasn't anything that was out of the ordinary that he needed clarification on. Yeah, if somebody asked me, are you hearing things from the TV or something? What? But you saw the way that he answered it. Is like he kind of laughed about it and chuckled about it. But then he did say something afterwards that kind of made me think something different. But you're right. He didn't. It was like it was normal questioning, which yeah, that's a good observation. But I loved where he was like going, he wanted to see his thoughts and check his memory and all that. So he said, what, cups, newspaper, bananas, right? So he said that up front. And then he asked him again that later to see if he could remember that. So checking on, and he did a good job. There was one thing.
Oh, hey, Doug, I meant to bring that up. The cup, newspaper, banana. When he first asked him, I knew he was going to ask him later. So I was telling myself to remember that. And I couldn't remember when he. I remember cup. And that was it.
I actually have a hint for that. My mom taught me because she has to go through these dementia tests every year. And when she gets her 3 words, she immediately makes a sentence using them in her mind. And she can remember them because she used them in a sentence. She doesn't tell the examiner what her sentence is, but she always passes that because she can remember her sentence.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Very good.
I did think that he needed to stop talking. He was going to end up in a psych ward if he kept going.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing is when you get people in, that's it, the conversation's normal almost, so he wasn't questioning any of the questions. And so
right.
maybe, I don't know. I've never been in the presence of somebody taking a mental status exam where they were, on a different plane, if you will, I guess, lack of terms.
I have.
Have you? So talk to me about that. What did it?
Seriously, my son experienced it.
Okay.
That's what drove me down this path. Actually. Anyways, it's weird when people are hallucinating, and to them it's so real. They don't have any problem telling you, like, you didn't just see that, Yeah. And it happened repeatedly, and he told me that, I got him to a counselor, and he ran out of the counselor's office, told me the guy was a robot. Like,
Oh,
what? I mean, that was just one thing. I mean, there was multiple things. And I mean, there's no doubt. Carl is nothing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I get it. Maddie, you were going to say
That
something? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Troy.
I was just gonna say, I've also seen soldiers that, not as intense and as long as I experienced with my son, but I've seen soldiers with similar stuff. They're just like, but for them, they'll just be telling you like, "Hey, Sergeant, I can't go down there because so and so's down there," and it's like, dude, so and so's been gone for like 3 years, but
Mm,
I'm telling you, he's down there. Stuff like that. You see soldiers do stuff like that all the time,
mm. What
especially in high
happened?
stress.
Oh, high
And
stress.
another big one, yeah, and another big one is like in certain, well, in Ranger School, almost everybody has a leprechaun story. People see leprechauns in Ranger School.
Okay.
No, no kidding. If you know anybody that has,
Is that from jumping out of planes or what?
oh, the Ranger School, they put them under high stress
Yeah.
on purpose and see if they can still lead
Okay.
their unit. So they keep them up for a long time, barely feed them. Um, it's
Uh,
really intense. And the guys, you know, I can
mm,
tell you all kinds of stories about hallucinations that happen in Ranger School.
wow. Okay. That's a lot. Yeah. Well, that's a big
But
test.
anyways, but when you live with someone who's experiencing it and you like see it like nonstop, it's just horrifying.
Yes. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I'm just letting you know. I guess what I'm trying to say is when when you do experience it, I mean, there's the times I've seen it. There is no doubt. I mean, you don't have to go through this. Like I could see a professional maybe in a professional setting when that person is sitting down, they might try to expose themselves. And of course, they don't want to open up anymore. People have probably been telling them for a while, or at least giving them hints that something's wrong here. So you don't want to get like Cindy was saying, you want to get thrown in a mental ward.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take all this very carefully. So I could see how in a professional setting, you would have to probably walk somebody through and ask them questions like that to where they would react in a way that was like, oh, okay, we need to explore this further. But
So-
when
Yeah.
I've experienced it, it's been very clear, no doubt. That person said what they're seeing, what they're thinking, the way they're just approaching life is completely irrational and like basically black and white. Like I see this right there. Don't you see that? You know,
Yes. Yeah.
and like the TV talking to you stuff, they'll be like, "Oh my God, did you hear that? That means that Jeffrey Epstein is coming back. He's in coming in the next room. That's what they just told us on the TV. What?
Oh,
That's not what they just said on the TV. Anyways, I'm seeing the same things you are, and what you're saying.
yeah.
As I'm experiencing it. So I guess
Yes.
as the mental health professional, you're not experiencing that with them. You didn't live through that. You're trying to ask them, trying to ascertain, what's your mindset in general.
That's
But when you're
good.
experiencing it, you're right there with them. So I
Yeah.
guess you wouldn't have to be an expert to know that we just witnessed the same thing, and this isn't a matter of interpretation. You're way out there on stuff. And for my
Mm.
son, it was all pedophile stuff. He thought Jeffrey Epstein. He thought his job from God was to go hunt down Jeffrey Epstein, and this is after Epstein had died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean it was horrible.
So, do you mind talking about this?
No, I don't mind.
Okay.
I
So,
mean, I wouldn't want anybody else to say, hey, Charlie Sloan's son was wacko. You know what I mean? I wouldn't like to share
no,
anybody else to share it after this.
no, 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 no.
I'd share it. I would share it here.
Yeah. Hang on one second. I, I'm gonna pause this, okay? Sorry about that. So Christ is our standard for comparison for holiness, the objective of our sanctification. As Wayne Grudem explains, sanctification is a progressive work of God and man that makes us more and more free from sin and like Christ in our active lives. So we're always striving. That's our thing that we're always striving. That's our plumb line is Christ, right? Um, this is why self-examination is essential to the process of sanctification and spiritual growth. It shows us how we measure up to Jesus. So as you're doing counseling, this will be, one thing that you can do. We have all of these assessments that you can use, but what our true assessment is, how do we measure up to what our identity in Christ and so on, okay? So let's see. Christian self-examination is not a form of navel gazing. We are not to be self-absorbed and looking forward or inward to see how we feel about ourselves. That's not the objective, because a lot of secular psychology, that's what it would be. How do you feel about yourself? When they talk about self, the secular psychology would say, how do you feel about yourself? That's not the plumb line, right? So we are not to be self-absorbed and looking inward to see how we feel about ourselves or how we compare to other people. I love one of the saying, comparison is the thief of joy, right? Okay, so this is why self-examination is essential to the process of sanctification and spiritual growth. It shows us how we measure up to Jesus. Christian self-examination is not a form of navel gazing. We are not to be self-absorbed and looking inward to see how we feel about ourselves, or how we compare to others. Instead, we are to look inward to see how we measure against the plumb line in Jesus, okay? Self-examination should not be introspective self-obsession, but a humble, clear-minded assessment of ourselves through the gospel. So we have a blueprint, the Bible, okay? It means looking to Scripture and seeing God's commands as the Holy Spirit points out the sins we harbor that are contrary to the truth. We should regularly engage in the process of self-examination so that we grow in awareness about how we are measuring up against God's perfect standard. Okay. So practical application. So asking these small questions. So every day we are required to make thousands of decisions. Thousands. I think, they say you have 70,000 thoughts a day, and many, many, many of them are the same ones over and over again. Okay. Researchers at Cornell University found that people make an average of 226.7 decisions about food alone. Okay. About food alone. The more power and responsibility that has been given to us, the more complex, difficult and numerous our decisions become. King David, for example, was frequently required to make difficult decisions based on the requests that were made of him. Throughout the book of Samuel, we find him using a simple technique that aided his decision-making, asking simple, clarifying questions. Time and again, David asked small, simple questions such as, "What shall I do for you?" In 2 Samuel 21:2. What do you want to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? 21:4. At first glance, this practice may seem trivial. After all, who doesn't ask such questions? But when we look closer, we see that David uses such simple questions to collect information for making complex decisions. So see, he's assessing right now. He's asking these questions, assessing the situation, then collecting all the data, right? And then so that they can make these complex decisions. Okay. As American management expert W. Edwards Deming explained, the ultimate purpose of taking data is to provide a basis for action or recommendations. Asking simple questions is often more fruitful in helping us collect the data and clarifying our concerns than more complex questions. So all these simple little questions, like you just witnessed in that video that we watched, all these small, simple questions add up to helping us make these big, complex decisions, okay? So, the small questions help us to narrow our focus, in this case, from the span of a lifetime to a single week. This frees our mind to think about small scale solutions to our problems. Remember, that's what we were talking about with Maddie, right? Breaking everything down to the smallest thing and working up from there. So taking care of small things to take care of the big things. So we might decide, for instance, that the best way we could serve this week is to offer to babysit the children of a single mother in our church. This may point us to the larger change we need to make, such as becoming foster parents, right? So maybe even babysitting for this small child, we may go, no, not so much. Or we're like, I love this, and the Holy Spirit is directing me to get into this, right? So making small changes to work towards a bigger, greater thing, okay? So what this is saying here, self-assessment on self-examination. So a quote for reflection, it says, right judgment reminds us that we ever fall short and are not holier than thou. We also learn our strengths and their burdens, and the burdens we are best equipped to carry, enabling us to serve more effectively. So if we understand and we're humble and humility, the more, and so we become better equipped because we're in tune with the Holy Spirit, and it enables us to serve in the capacity. Because what you guys are doing going into counseling, man, it's a lot. Just talking to these counselors and seeing so many people a day, one thing is it's not the same person for that whole day long. It's different people each hour, and how you got to switch your mindset to change too. So this is all about self-awareness about ourselves so that we can get into these positions of helping more and more and more people, okay? Definition of this self-examination is essential to the process of sanctification because it shows us how we measure up to Jesus. Okay, and then meditate on the following passage. Who has spoken and it came to pass unless the Lord has commanded it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and bad come? Why should a living man complain, a man about the punishment of his sins? Let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord. What's it say right there? Let us test and examine our own ways or ways of man in assessments and return to the Lord. What he wants us to be in his image, all of those things. So, and then evaluation, okay? To possess such knowledge, to know thyself, has been considered by many spiritual writers to be necessary for attaining what? Wisdom, humility, and spiritual freedom. We gain such knowledge by frequently reflecting on our actions and attitudes to measure how they conform to Christ. How do you feel about self-reflection? Do you find it easy to take an honest assessment of your virtues and your flaws, or does it make you uncomfortable to measure your spiritual progress? Think about yourself going through all of these things. Think about yourself taking these assessments and assessing your own virtues and flaws, and does it make you uncomfortable? If it makes you uncomfortable, how do you think it makes your clients feel going through these things too, as well? Let's see. So here's some drill down questions. How much time per month do I spend in self-reflection? What metrics do I find most useful for measuring my sanctification? Am I making progress in my spiritual formation? That's a good one. Do I frequently make excuses for my failure to be obedient and faithful to God's commands? Am I growing in faithfulness or stagnating by being too comfortable in my spiritual life? What evidence do I find that I am in Christ, right? Does my evaluation reveal that I see myself the way Jesus sees me? Ooh. Think about that one. Do I ever thank God that I am not as sinful as other people? How am I measuring up compared to Jesus? So, key takeaways: the Christian life requires frequent self-examination to ensure we are overcoming sin and growing in obedience. So, really, what that kind of to me is saying is where it says the Christian life requires frequent self-examination. So, always examining to see where and assessing ourselves to see where we need to change, how our relationship is with God, during this time. Maybe it's even I have to adjust my prayer life or something. I think we do get so busy sometimes that we neglect some of those things, right? Our relationship, our prayer life, meditating on the Word of God, all of those things, when those should be our first priority, right? So anyway, I thought I'd bring that up just to show, hey, in the Bible, it even says we should always be assessing ourselves and assessing one another, that we are walking in God's light and so on. What do you guys think? I'll open that up after. What are your thoughts after that?
After all of that,
Yeah.
I mean, what I kept hearing, that's the reason I sent you that, was that our identity in
Yeah.
Christ is what. Well, I just shared something in the chat that
Yeah.
essentially said our identity in Christ is what's going to heal our identity crises, things that are bothering us, our you know our issues, whatever you want to call it. What it boils down to is, and this helps me a lot, is thinking about what's happening here in this life is really meaningless. And there's scripture that talks. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I wish Dylan was here. He would. But there's something about there's something kind of scripture that says that don't store up for yourself treasures here on earth. Instead, store up treasures in heaven. And that
Yes.
makes me think about, like, also the flip side of that is don't worry about the uh, the troubles of this world.
Yeah.
It's going to be this is temporary. This is short lived. Uh, and whatever's happening here is reflecting on this body that I'm not going to use anymore. And my
Yeah.
identity doesn't have anything to do with this existence. This existence is preparing me for my real identity, which is I'm being sanctified to be like Jesus.
That's good. Yeah. You know what? And I think as Christians also we've got it pretty good where right here it's saying um, how do you measure? Here's what you measure up against. And I think some of those things that we're doing, when we bring up assessments on things, what are we measuring up against on those too sometimes? you know so just taking that into consideration. I don't know, it's just like I'm writing my dissertation and everything, and it's on having a Christian worldview in counseling, and um how do you maintain that when there's so many things out there that are secular, and the ACA code of ethics, all of these things, um and it really is so incumbent upon us to have to become licensed Christian counselors so that we have a voice in this profession. To me, that's how important it is. Because if we don't, you know, the alternative is not good. So you guys
I
have
agree.
you guys have the power and you have the voice. And I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad there's so many, believers that are going down this same path. Because I completely agree with what you're saying. If there's not Christians engaging in this space, who's going to have the idea? The secular world is not going to.
Right.
So if there's not some of us here, nobody will hear this perspective. And there's plenty of ideas from the world already.
That's right.
I think it's important also that we do that daily self check-in spiritually, even if it's just the quick mental run through. Have I prayed? Have I read my Bible?
Yeah.
Those things that keep my worldview in a line, because the journals we read, the things we see on TV, all of that's is trying to change our worldview. And I mean, just because we're Christians and we have a Christian worldview now doesn't mean that our worldview can't slip and become unchristian, non-biblical, if we aren't on guard against that.
Oh, absolutely. That's good. All right. So as we think about all that we've learned through these past 2 days, let me say, are there any questions that you guys have? If you've stored any up, or thoughts or anything like that, or what is a fear maybe you have moving forward? I don't know. Give me some thoughts about so you're looking into this. You haven't started counseling anyone, although you really have. You getting that in your mind. You got helping skills, and you probably started using those in your conversations and stuff like that too. As you start moving forward, let me ask it this way. How has your mindset changed before the class up until now? What has changed? How about that?
Before this class?
When you signed up to take assessments class, and then you get into it, and then up to now, what has changed when you signed up for it and to now?
I've actually been thinking about a few things about the way my mind has changed. Because at first, of course, the very first thing I saw was a 30-page paper. Are you crazy? But then, as we go through I looked at assessments as things like the Rorschach test. Everybody knows about that.
Yeah.
Things like that, and it seemed kind of subjective, right?
Yeah.
And I guess most assessments can be considered, especially in this world, it can be considered subjective.
Yeah.
But I really like the way, but that paper I just sent you is really kind of like the way it breaks down. I don't want to. I could spend an hour talking about it already, but the way it breaks down, the way it relates different assessments to each other, and it was a study and then the conclusion was basically that like I just said before, that our identity in Christ is what's going to heal us.
Yes.
And I could see how using these assessments now. In other words, I guess before the class, I just kind of looked at this as another one of those classes I got to take. I'll push through it type thing. But as I'm going through it, I'm like, man, this is really valuable information. I keep telling y'all I'm a real behaviorist at heart. I can see value in, like, there's an exercise, let's do it, But this is almost like, this can be used like that. An assessment can be used like an exercise almost. I got this, and I guess even from the very beginning, I need to assess the situation here. And so I got to have a systematic way of approaching that. And the more I practice it, just like any other assessing skill in any other field, the more I practice it, the better I'm going to get at it, where I can start my client out on a more effective path than if I'm just kind of willy-nilly, well, let's try this exercise and let's try that exercise. I can get some real data, whether it's subjective or not.
Yes.
And say, let's let this guide what our exercises we're going to pick, type thing.
Yeah. And here's what I'd say to that as well. So you're not going to be alone in this. So and I know it's like, okay, if you get into an assessments class and you're like, oh, wow, you look at this book here, this big old book, right? And it's got talks about assessments and all of this stuff. Well, you're not alone in it. There's, when you get into counseling, it's a very tight community in the aspect of everybody loves learning from each other. So it's not one where you get in and everybody's cutthroat and no, it's more of a community where it's like we're in this together to accomplish this. And so everybody helps each other. And I love the community and culture that we built, and it kind of goes along those lines of at the counseling center where it's highly collaborative. It's people sit in each other's sessions and we have this room where people can go in and talk about cases, and then my door is always open and I take phone call, all the time. And, people, it's just very highly collaborative and people learn. And so they get into these places like this and so they don't feel alone. So one thing is like, I tell people to get into a place where you're going to have a lot of people around there who have been doing this, and you have access to them, because so many people, they do their these universities, and they can choose to go to a place like Abundant Life, or they can choose to go to somebody who has a private practice or something like that. Well, if you go to this thing with a private practice, you have access to one people, maybe two or whatever, and they may have time for you or they may not have time for you. So if you get into and you open your private practice, you have plenty of time to do that afterwards. I always say get into a place where you're going to have it, where it's built around community when you're learning, and that you do have access to ask questions all of the time. And I remember when I graduated, I did start in private practice, but I also stayed at Abundant Life, and I have on my phone about 10 different people that I can call right now. And we went to school together, and we've all been through a bunch of things together, and I could call them right now and ask questions. And we maybe spend an hour on the phone, whatever it is, but it's that important to them because they know they need it as well. And they learn, and they have access to me too, as well. So highly collaborative. Just remember to just stay in that type of mindset as you go along. Hope that helps. I know it was a long speech, but
I've noticed that how many free resources there are that there's not all this proprietary. Wait a minute, you got to get through a paywall before you can have this type of
yes,
teasers, which I expect all the time. Then I find it like, wait, I can have this for free?
yeah,
Okay, thanks.
yeah. That's the beauty of it is, but just like hey, I go out and read a lot of stuff on being, on biblical things that, and then, but you got to weigh it against the Bible and stuff like that. So sometimes you're coming across people's thoughts and it's kind of different from what maybe your beliefs
Right.
and all that. So it's always, measure. So I say that to say, be careful of it in mental health as well. I mean, there's some theories out there and stuff like that too that are questionable. So, and there always have been. I mean, there always will be.
Yeah, you gotta be able to critically think through what you find.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about lobotomy yesterday, right? So we know now that that's probably not the best way to go. Whereas back then, it's the thing it was the in thing at that time. Didn't know any different or better. So just always being careful.
A little bit unrelated, but not. If you ever want to see how far we've come, there's Glore Psychiatric Museum in St. Joe.
I love that place.
Right.
Hey, you all got to go there. If you guys haven't been there, you got to go. It is, man, I am telling you. Have you been there, Maddie?
What is it?
It's called Glore Psychiatric Museum. It's in St. Joe.
I was saying, do we get extra credit if we go?
Yeah.
Sure.
I do that in
Oh,
several
you're
papers.
being serious?
Yeah, but you got to write a 35-page paper on
Listen, I already got two 30-page papers. I'm good.
it. Yeah, no, it is very, very cool, Cindy. Yeah, I went to that, and it talks about the history um of psychiatry and what people thought, and what they did. And oh my gosh, some of it was so cruel to people that you meant, how could anybody even do that to one another? Even, you think about as you learn through things. What's the one? I can't, it wasn't Milgram, or was it? What was the one where they did this test and you go and you think you're shocking somebody, and there's this authority figure standing over you, and they're telling, keep turning it up, keep turning it up. You're really not shocking the person. There's just somebody on the other side screaming. What was that? Do you guys remember? Can't remember what that was. Anyway. Yeah, I highly recommend going to that place up there. Any other thoughts? So let me go around and we'll do one. What's your takeaway? And then we can take away our question. So who wants to go first? What's your big takeaway so far?
I can go.
Okay.
I actually just kind of wanted to make a note on like what Charlie was saying with identity. If y'all know me, I like to work ahead of classes, so I was getting all the journals done with, and the last like chapters 11 through 13 is kind of talking about like life, career planning, the interests or value ones, or like then we get to the personality. And so as I was like writing the journal, just like made me reflect over how these assessments are helpful in having us kind of understand, yeah, what are the things that we enjoy to do, our hobbies, different stuff like that. Like the Enneagram, I think, is something we probably all have heard of or utilized, just to help direct us in some ways. But really going back to like the standard of the Bible, and us comparing ourselves to what that standard is, and more than anything, our identity found in Christ, and He is the one that had made us and created us in His image, and just the truths behind that. That sometimes like people will take those kind of assessments, and if it's positive things, then great. But if they get scored negatively, then they believe that that's truly who they are, and that's what defines them, and that's not the case. And so, I just like found that to be interesting. Like, but on the flip side, common grace, right? Like these assessments are helpful for us to be able to understand areas of growth that we need to focus on, and our strengths and our weaknesses. So I feel like that's been my takeaway from the class of just there are definitely pros and cons, and we're going to like learn more as we go through our career of what assessments are helpful. And it is going to vary depending on the client, because that's the nuance of our job. Every person is very different, but also we all have the same problems too. Like anxiety is not a new problem. Depression's not a new problem. And so, scripture too talks a lot about these different areas. So just combining both areas of research that we have from science, but also like what God's word says about these things.
That's so good. Thank you. Yeah, excellent. I love that part. It's like when people come in and do counseling, it's like I remember, couples coming in. I'm like going, they'd here's our presenting problem. I'm like, okay, let me guess. And I'm exaggerating or whatever. It's like I'll go up and draw on the board. Here's your cycle, and this is how you get into it, and this is why, and blah blah blah. And they're going, yeah, how do you know? I'm like, because you're no different from all these other people that come through. But that's one thing, is you're normalizing a lot of things with them saying, yes, so many other people have these exact same problems or issues that we have. So I'm no different from other people. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of the same things over and over again. But each person has a different, like you said, identity. So different presentation, I guess, if you will. So yeah, it's what keeps it pretty interesting too. Thank you for that. That was so good. Thank you. Felicia?
So, coming into this class, I was like, what is this going to be about? And I feel like I've learned a lot. Um, the practical side of assessments. Although going through the book, I was like, there's a couple of chapters I feel like I need to reread because
Oh,
if
sure.
we have to know the technical side of it for the exams for licensure, I would
Yes.
not do well on that. So I'm gonna have to really go back and reread that because it just seemed a lot.
Okay. Thanks for bringing that up. So here's what I will say. As you guys move forward and you get into internship and you're getting ready to take your test, um, there's a time where you go back to your schoolwork and kind of look through those things too. But we'll give you um, study thing. There's like Rosenthal has a study guide, and there's other like NCMHE has study guides, stuff like that. So we'll give you those things to help you prepare for those. Does that make sense? So that you
Yeah.
don't feel overwhelmed and all that stuff too. It will hone in. That's why I gave you that one video from last night, because that was over people writing stuff for here's how you study for this exam. Okay. And here's the things that are going to be the key to look for because man, you can't memorize this whole book here. You can't, and even if you did memorize this whole book, it may not be all of that you need to know, right? So it's doing those study guides will show and help you what the key things is to look for. And that's kind of what I wanted to go through with you all today is it's not about each individual assessment because we could go through a million of those and it'll just confuse you. It's about, okay, why do we need assessments? How do we get to these assessments? What's the importance of it? And then we did show you a few assessments, but when you get in to doing your internship and we do supervision, so that's when it's going to be, okay, I have this thing going on. Okay, so let's look for this assessment that may help them. And then you'll be able to apply it better. I mean, you can look at a million of them now. You'll just get overwhelmed. And I didn't want to overwhelm you guys. That's when you get into internship. You can see it you can apply it and see it how it applies to the counseling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think I've learned a lot because again, I didn't really know what to expect coming into the class. Again, when I started reading the book, I was like, wait a minute, now do I know what I'm talking about here?
Right.
What they said. So I still am like, I don't know. But 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 the practicality part of it came together for me. So I'm thankful that we got this class. I'm thankful for the even the other young counselors that came on today and the questions that we were able to ask them. That's always helpful to be able to get your perspective and their perspective, especially with them being new and knowing that we're going to have to go that route,
Yeah.
with their going. So I'm thankful. It's been a great class.
Yeah, and that's why I loved having them on because I wanted you to see they've been in your spot. And you're not the only one who said what you just said, Felicia. Probably everybody did. So you're not the only one. And I wanted to show you that, hey, they're getting into counseling and now they're finding assessments. Guess how? Through collaboration with other people. They're like asking these questions and these other people are going, hey, I do this and I do this. And like, okay, let me try that. And they've tried it and they've added it. So you can see, and they're not that far ahead of you. One person is probably only like Jolene is probably only 1 or 2 semesters ahead of you, right? And Ben, they're not that far. So see their confidence level in using these types of things. Yeah, you'll be there. Definitely be there. Thank you, Felicia. I appreciate that. Cindy?
I guess I kind of piggyback off what she said. but also just appreciation that an assessment isn't standardized. That you're constantly making them from the time you walk into the lobby to shake their hand and say hi. And so, they don't have to be as hardcore and stressful as a multiple choice test.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, it's getting kind of late. Do you want me to just email you my PowerPoint? Because I didn't have it done yesterday.
I'm totally sorry about that. Yeah, if
That's
you
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Susan?
I agree with Felicia and Cindy with their comments. I prejudged this class, and I feel more comfortable after these last 2 days. It does seem more practical, and it seems like a great tool. I'm understanding it better, and I really liked the attachment style assessment.
Yeah.
Presentation today with also the dyadic presentation of that. I like the fact that it was mentioned that we can use the attachment style assessment, the geogram, the prepare and enrich, and the dyadic all together. Kind of, that was interesting. So
Yeah.
it's a great practical tool, and I'm understanding it better today.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's good. And here's one thing I will add. So say it's always depending on when you're at. So if you're just in a strict counseling center or whatever, those four things that you saw today will be ones that you would use a lot, right? Now, and you probably wouldn't use the MMPI stuff or all these ones that have 600 questions on them and all that stuff too. So, but you would use them in the case of some center that deals specifically with those types of things, and you would use that a lot, but then you wouldn't use a lot of other assessments. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that like the attachment one, I would almost use that with everybody that comes through. Yeah. And then couples, I would definitely use it with couples and prepare and enrich stuff and the dyadic adjustment scale and all of those things. Yeah. So just depending on what you're counseling.
Right.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I appreciate that. Maddie?
Yeah, first of all, I really enjoyed it. I am very much like I like the science nerdy kind of data side of things. I've always liked that. Even when I was like in high school, stats was one of my favorite classes.
Okay.
So, Felicia, yeah, we can get together when we have to study for the NCE, okay? Um, so like I was excited about this class, but then I heard from a lot of counselors that I know that like they don't use formal assessments too often, or they don't use many formal assessments too often. And so I was like, okay, is this going to be useless? Is this going to be useful? Like, what is this? And then I think my biggest takeaway was that like, because we've been talking about and meetings at work a lot, like our counseling styles, and talking about how I have a very like structured, systematic, observational way of thinking. That's not necessarily too intuitive to being like, oh, this is this or this is that. I like to go through processes,
Yeah.
and procedures, and like I felt like there was a disconnect between, okay, how do I get the more kind of back and forth comforting unconditional positive regard environment to meld with a more structured way of doing counseling. And I think this is kind of that transitional piece, is these developing which assessments I think I would fit well with my style and the kind of clients that I see, so that I can like rule out symptomology or whatever it might be. Like I just I really do like the fact that this gives me like logical handles
Yeah.
on identifying or identifying various different like pieces of, you know, whether it be their marriage relationship or symptoms or how
Mm.
it's affecting. Like I like the structured organization of it. And I like knowing that I can use that in a counseling environment and it not like ruin the therapeutic alliance because I'm quizzing them or whatever. Because you can do it in a conversational kind of style. So it just clarified a lot of things for me, but it gave me also more confidence in my counseling style, I feel like, and how I'm developing it.
Yes, that's very good. And here's the other part is there's jobs out there, that for people just like who just do, assessments with people and like that and score it and evaluate and all that stuff. Um, I mean, God bless you. It's not for me or anything.
I do kind of like it. I think it's because it's almost
Yeah.
sleuthing kind of thing, to a
Yeah.
degree. Like trying to uncover and discover what's
Yeah.
going on, and not that you can't do that in just
Yeah.
conversational ways and the question,
Yeah.
questions, formal questions and informal questions and whatever. But
Yes.
I do also like the rigid structure sometimes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
especially with kids.
Yeah.
Get them back online.
That's what's kind of funny about where I work is Larry is that way, he's like, "Whew," like this, and I'm like more just I guess you would say visionary, and he's got to have systems in place,
He
and I'm
needs
like,
you and you need him.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely. It's like system, having those processes. I mean, yes, we need that and all that stuff too, but I don't want to be have too many fences around me and all that stuff too. But he likes fences. He likes living in those. So yeah, we need each other. It's fun. Yeah. Thank you, Maddie. That's awesome. I appreciate that. All right, Charlie, last but not least.
Oh, I thought I already went.
Did you?
So, biggest takeaway, I guess. I mean, it has to be right now. I'm really focused on this, healing through finding your identity in Christ,
Yeah.
and that I'm in the middle of trying to read that paper I sent you.
Yeah.
It's really, in fact, I just sent my wife. I was trying to tell her about it. I sent her a text earlier, kind of summarizes, what I'm working through here. It's like I was
Yes.
just trying to explain it to her in a way she could understand. But I said basically that the bottom line is that when you form a relationship with Jesus, we become a new creature, right? And that new creature is totally identified by his relationship. It's completely tied to Jesus' value. So if we find our self-worth in our relationship with Jesus, it doesn't matter what else happens or what else we're going through as far as how we feel about ourselves.
Yes.
So and that's a big issue. In my opinion, with men specifically, is they we, 'cause I do it too. We feel like we're not worthy of love, and that we're bad. And especially the culture. That's what they're telling us right now. Everything you do as a man is negative, bad, 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 or completely stupid. Look at the characters on TV. So, anyways, it's natural at some point for a man to start saying, "Well, maybe I am just a piece of crap, and no wonder I feel like crap. God probably wants me to go through this crap." All that stuff. And so, I really like the idea of this helping men specifically. I think it would be very helpful for them to start thinking about this way. And that's one thing I love about this idea of using assessments is I wouldn't know how to take a man down that road.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say it. I've heard those words before, but looking at it from I know it's not completely objective, but you got data in an assessment that you can say, now see how this, your value is not about if your wife cheated on you, doesn't mean that you're not desirable.
That's right.
Your wife didn't cheat on you because there's something wrong with you,
That's right.
for instance. All the issues that I can think of, I keep coming up with, yeah, but it all comes back to, the reason you're hurting is because you think you have all these thoughts, and usually those thoughts are about what, uh, how that reflects on you,
That's right.
and really your own vision of you, and the so it makes it's for the first time I really understand that phrase that your identity in Christ is what defines you.
Yes, absolutely. That's
And
good.
I've never, like I said, I've heard that my whole life, and as a general concept, maybe I understood it, but I didn't really have real meaning to me until these last couple of days, actually. And so I
Yeah.
really appreciate what you all were. I was trying to read all of the labels on there. I'm assuming all those things you're reading today are in the files section of our.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I want to read that myself.
there's a ton of stuff out there. So just download away, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there for y'all. Thank you for that, Charlie. Okay. Any last things? You guys are awesome. Hang on, I'm gonna stop this here.